So just a little background about cell count. So cell count started at PASAN in 1995 by Zoltan Lugassi as a newsletter by and for prisoners and others concerned with the HIV crisis in prisons. During this time, people in prisons living with HIV were not given equal access to healthcare and treated with cruelty and isolated due to misinformation and stigma from those running the prisons, which carried over to other prisoners. Cell Count was a platform that prisoners living with HIV used to counter this misinformation through articles, poetry, artwork, and other contributions. Today, Cell Count is a popular publication inside among many prisoners, regardless of health status. There is still a focus on HIV and HCV in the context of the current overdose crisis. It has grown to encapsulate experiences related to that crisis inside. Beyond that, Cell Count is also a space for people to express frustration and anger towards the general experience of being incarcerated, as well as philosophical, emotional, spiritual, and artistic pieces. Cell Count goes out to anywhere between 700 to 1,200 people inside of prisons across Canada, 4 times a year. It's also mailed to families of prisoners, individual subscribers, and organizations that work with people who have experience of incarceration. Anyone can subscribe to Cell Count. We accept a donation of $20 a year for printed subscriptions, and then $5 a year, and I'll attach a PDF to an email and send it to you 4 times a year. The article I chose from this issue, which is the most recent issue, just came out. It's hot off the press. It's called A Letter to My Fellow Inmates by Devin Kachpaw. My name is Devin Kachpaw, and I'm currently serving a 27-month sentence at a federal penitentiary. I've heard of Cell Count before, but never read one until recently, for the single fact that these are not available much in provincial institutions, and this is my first and hopefully last federal bit. The message your paper portrays is wonderful, and the article that really plays my heartstrings is The Criminal Lives Matter by Brian Kerr in issue number 92. The article is the motivation for me writing now to share my recent experiences in the system during the COVID-19 pandemic. Both the conditions and institutions are becoming horrendous, and the culture between fellow inmates or inmate brotherhood is almost non-existent these days. First, I want to give a little background information. This isn't my first rodeo. My upbringing was a good one, with both parents still together today and living in a middle-class neighborhood in the Niagara region. So I never grew up wanting. I was the chunky kid, so kids would try to pick on me, but true to my dad's wisdom, I used my fist to put an end to that real quick. That wisdom paved the way for my involvement in the criminal justice system, entering the teenage years with sex and drugs and the already established notion of defending one's manhood with violence. Soon I was standing before judges and doing time behind bars. Up until I was 24, I was constantly in and out for a few months at a time, always for expressive violence done under intoxication. Then the revolving door stopped. I didn't want to be a man serving a life sentence on the installment plan, so I started to make changes. I was finally growing up. I remained out of jail for 3.5 years, but since I still drank at times, it was only a matter of time before I slipped up and got into a fight while drunk again. This time it was taken seriously due to my past record, and I got significantly more time for the charges. I did a year, and I got out January 3rd, 2017, knowing what I had to do to finally quit drinking and drugging completely. I had great success with employment, finances, assets, you name it. Started my own company as a subcontractor during a new home build with years of sobriety under my belt. It was great. No one could foresee the coronavirus pandemic coming. So when it did hit, I was totally unprepared for the financial strain and mental distress now upon me, along with all this free time on my hands. The builder closed down the site. With every single social support I had ever used closed down due to COVID, within 6 months, this all changed. All this changed in my life. I relapsed and found myself incarcerated, sentenced to a total of 27 months, and sent off to the federal system. Okay, so here's a summary of my involvement with the criminal justice system. To show I'm not new to this, Jail has never been a glorious place, but in the last 10 to 15 years, the conditions in jails has gone to the crapper, and not just through funding cuts and the like. There is no more unity between inmates. We are fighting amongst each other and following some other twisted version of jail politics, where in truth, it just comes down to the he said and she said scenarios. When I first did time, the man who ran the ranges did so with fairness and respect towards their fellow inmates. Road problems. Oh yeah, you're following along. That's great. Ever entered the jail and stayed road problems. Worst case scenario, one-on-one fight where both men shook hands afterwards and no more was said or done while incarcerated. Nowadays, it's common to see guys get jumped by a whole group of guys with weapons involved, and the issue in which the beating was over remains a problem for prolonged periods of time, following the guy to any range he ends up on, or even to the new jail he is transferred to. No one likes a rat, and I'm not defending them, but back in the day, if someone tried to label someone a rat, he best have the paperwork to prove it, or he was likely to eat a knuckle sandwich for spreading lies or unprovable information. Today, all it takes is for the accuser to have safety in numbers and more backup than the accused, and anything can be said about someone with no more proof than the accuser's word. Has anyone else noticed how PC ranges, so protective custody ranges, are starting to outnumber GP ranges, general population? This is in direct correlation to what I mentioned above. A problem now follows a guy wherever he goes and is left with two options to either segregate oneself indefinitely or check into PC. My home bucket used to have one PC range where only sexual offenders and proven rats ended up. The jail has 6 medium security dorms, 4 max security ranges with cells and 2 segregation areas, the upper and the lower segs. As of the day I left provincial for federal, there were 3 GP dorms, 3 PC dorms, 3 PC max ranges, and only 1 GP max range, with the top brass considering making the work range PC, only since they far outnumber general population now. What is wrong with this picture? It's a standing joke now in my bucket that as long as you lost my place. Have enough buddies on a GP range, you can check out a PC with no issues, and it happens all the time now. While the guy was in PC, he would be called all the usual insults, but 2 weeks later, he is now GP and breaking bread with the guys who would yell insults at him and now joining in the harassment of his former fellow PC inmates. Another growing problem I now see is the bullying of fellow inmates on the same ranges. Every single one of us are going through a stressful and low point in our lives by being incarcerated, and now guys are being brought even lower by constant, unending harassment by their fellow inmates. I have seen guys finally say enough is enough and attack their bully only to get jumped by the bully and his friends, bounced off the range, and a kite sent off to follow the guy to his new range so he can be beaten again. A kite is basically like a message to the next institution that somebody's going to let them know that, you know, this guy needs to get beaten up, I guess. Guys had their canteen taken from them for no reason than the fact that they are perceived as weak and have no buddies to back them up. There is so much more I can talk about, but the letter would be a mile long. So I bring back to the point of all this. There's no more unity and respect for the fellow inmate. It's closer to a dog-eat-dog world inside the provincial jails. Federal, I will admit, is far more mature and civilized, but you definitely see remnants of the now provincial mindset seeping into the federal mentality as well. With all the funding cuts and privileges being taken away from us, we will never be able to stand together and fight for them back the way things are going now. If I, an inmate, can see these things, you can bet your ass the correctional staff see it too. And their answer will always be to take away privileges from us. How can we expect to get more rights and privileges if we as a group are divided and becoming increasingly uncivilized towards each other? We can't and shouldn't expect a thing. All that being said, the correctional staff are now increasingly treating us worse and worse and in turn violating our rights. Yet they have the excuse that we are acting worse and worse. In their minds, it's justified, but in reality, it's wrong. Everything the inmates of the past fought for is becoming undone. The whole coronavirus pandemic has been tough for all of us, and every inmate has suffered during the lockdowns, with loss of visits, rec time, out of cell time, etc. When I got arrested and sent to the bucket, I was coming off dope. So I was in withdrawal and intern had a fever. Because of all this, I was put on droplet protocol and put into segregation for 14 days. During the 14 days, my toilet got clogged to the point even a plunger could not clear it. So I told the COs to contact maintenance. Being on droplet, they refused to let me use another toilet. So I had to continue to use a clogged one. 2 days after it was initially clogged, maintenance finally showed up only to refuse to fix my toilet since he refused to wear the PPE required to interact with an inmate on droplet. So 2 more days passed with that waste coming out of the withdrawing inmate packed into that toilet. It got unbearable, and I wouldn't stop yelling until they fixed my toilet. On the 4th day, they offered me my second shower in 14 days and said, as I showered, maintenance would fix my toilet. So I was ecstatic for both my toilet getting fixed and finally being allowed to shower again. When I went back to my cell, the maintenance guy fixed my toilet, but got feces everywhere. The walls, the floor, my mattress, my bedding, everything had poop on it. I refused to go into that cell, but the COs pushed me in there and locked the door behind me. I was given only a spray bottle and had to use my clothes and bedding to clean the mess he made, then sit naked for about an hour before laundry gave me new clothes and sheets. Also, I never got another shower for the rest of my time in droplet and didn't wash again until I hit a regular range. And yes, I was negative on my COVID test. This is but only one example of the horrendous treatment of inmates during the pandemic, which I truly believe is fueled by the declining attitude of inmates towards each other and the attitude of correctional staff in response to that decline of inmates' attitudes. There is no excuse for breaking our basic human rights, but let's show them we are human beings who are capable of carrying a respectful and civilized attitude towards each other. This way, we give them no reason to justify in their minds the horrendous and frankly illegal treatment of inmates by correctional staff. I know for a fact every single one of us is capable of so much better. Some of the smartest, friendliest, and most compassionate people I've ever met were inmates. People tend to remember the worst of someone opposed to the best. We need to give less of the worst of us and more of the best of us. Then unite as fellow inmates and make this correctional system what it should be, a correctional system, not just a catch and release holding system like it's becoming more and more each day. God bless all of you and stay strong. We will get back to some normalcy eventually. This pandemic cannot last forever.